Payment technology is starting to really crank up in the restaurant and hospitality space. And, as we look at technology, the explosion of companies that are moving into this space across all aspects is really getting interesting. My name is Paul Barron. This is the Barron Report. We're going to dive into this today about looking at a company by the name of Sunday. That's the app name. And joining me today is one of the founders, and that is Miss Christine de Wendel. Great to have you on the show.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Christine, let's get into Sunday, the product line itself, kind of where you guys started, what was the original mission and proposition to the restaurant industry for what you could do in terms of your app?
So it's a great question. How do we start? Well, Sunday is an app that helps customers pay in restaurants at tables with a QR code. And
right.
the company was founded within a successful European restaurant group called Big Mama that's owned by my co-founder, Victor Luer. And this summer, Victor and his co-founder at Big Mama decided they were going to test payment by QR codes on tables. Super simple concept. Everyone was starting to use QR codes for menus. And the idea was, during the pandemic, how can you make people pay faster and how can you create a touchless payment method? And so they piloted this simple solution, which has now become Sunday, and the success was phenomenal. More than 100,000 tables processed the solution. They basically put QR codes on every table in Madrid, London, and Paris, where they have restaurants. And customer uptake was tremendous. 80% of customers were using it. Waiters loved it. Restaurants loved it as well. 15 minutes faster table turn time, 40% more tips. The numbers were phenomenal. And so in the fall, Victor thought, let's actually turn this into a real company. And let's make it an American company based in the US. And that's when I joined the adventure as CEO for the US and co-founder because we wanted to have a strong presence in the US from launch.
Sure. I like the story of an operator-driven application. There's a handful of them out there that, because, usually operators kind of have the most pain. They understand where the pain points are in an operation and what could be the potential. So a lot of times they just bring a different mindset to it. So many so many technology companies today, even though they're good ones, often I feel like there's a little bit lacking in their understanding of what the true problem is for a restaurant operator. So it's good to hear that you got the roots
absolutely
in the business itself.
We're 100% aligned. This is a solution by restaurants for restaurants. We're looking at 4 things when we pitch to restaurants. One is adoption. We have, I talked about 80% adoption during the test round last summer. Right now, the restaurants that are live in London have 96% adoption, which basically means almost everyone is paying with it. We see that wait staff love it. They get about 10% higher basket size, so people are spending more, and waiters get about 30% more time to spend with their customers. And if you can get a waiter doing things that he's passionate or she's passionate about, as opposed to just managing the bill, it has a huge impact. Another thing we've seen that restaurateurs really love is that it's simple to use, right? We're integrated to the POS. We're working with most POSs out there, and it takes just a few minutes to get the solution set up. So simplicity is key for restaurants. And finally, I love this one because it's, of course, very important for restaurants, especially after the tough time the industry has had this past year, is we're generally cheaper than what you would have with a typical payment processing fees. And that's huge.
Yeah, that's good. So essentially you're kind of bypassing the merchant account, so to speak. Is that so let's kind of walk through this here for a second. For a restaurant to sign up, do they sign up much like a merchant application? What do they get from you that enables them to put Sunday in their restaurant today?
So it's a great question. How does it work today operationally? Our sales team will reach out to the restaurant, explain how it works. We'll set up a quick statement of work, which is basically a relationship with the restaurant. And then what we do is It'll take, between 10 and 30 minutes, depending on, what POS it is and who's on the other end of the phone. We're going to be integrated, and we already are integrated with most of the POSs. And so it's just an additional feature that will come. Once
Gotcha.
the restaurant has signed up and can access Sunday through the POS, what we do is we give the restaurant access to the QR code generation portal. And so they just download the QR codes, or we can send them for them. We map out the tables to the QR codes, and then we give them whatever hardware they need. So usually it's a little frame or whatever they think is aesthetic for their restaurant, or the restaurants can do it themselves. And they basically put a QR code on the table. So the interfacing with the POS is already done on our side. There's just getting that QR code on the table. So it's basically printing it out and putting it in the right support. And then on the payment side, currently we're working with Stripe. And so we're accepting all major payment methods.
Right.
So Google Pay, Apple Pay, Visa, MasterCard, Amex, et cetera. And so for the restaurant, it's completely seamless. Stripe is actually the one processing the payment, and it's going through Stripe. And then the restaurant is getting the money back on their account.
So, okay, so it's going through the Stripe account for the restaurant or your Stripe account?
So we have a Stripe account, a master account, and during the sign-up process, there's a sub-sign-up, which is to access the Stripe account. And it's fairly easy to do. We've made the user flow super easy so that it's not complicated. Again, for restaurants, we know restaurants don't want to spend a lot of time on this, so we've made it really seamless.
Yeah. So where is this a monthly service? Am I paying by transaction? Where does Sunday make money?
So excellent question. The first important element is right now to launch, we're offering it for free. We want it to be at cost for restaurants because we know the industry's had trouble, and we want to make sure to be attractive. What we're doing is we've built pricing based on what most restaurants are paying as a payment processing fee. And so most of the restaurants we've started working with have found that it's less expensive than the payment processing fees they've had. What we're doing is we take a small commission after the free trial period on the transaction. So it's a percent-based commission as opposed to a transaction-based dollar amount.
Okay, so a percentage of whatever the transaction is. Is there an additional transaction that I'm paying to Stripe as well, or is it all inclusive?
That's all inclusive, and we absorb that cost.
Okay, so you guys absorb the merchant fee, I guess, from Stripe as the master account. Underneath that, you've got all these thousands of restaurants that are sub-accounts. They're paying a commission back up to you. Okay, all right. So
that's exactly it. And what we've seen with all the restaurants that are live is that piece is very simple and quite painless, which is why we're getting so much traction.
Yeah. All right, so merchant accounts I've seen as high as 3%. Is this something that you guys are coming in and you're competitive in that range? How does this flow?
We are making sure to be below that. Right now, we're working with a bunch of restaurant groups to make sure that our prices are competitive.
So if I've got a chain of 30 units today, I want to deploy Sunday, but my merchant rate is 1.87 right now from my bank. Would I be able to do a deal with you?
Yes. That's also part of being, a well-funded startup is we want to have an attractive offer. And so we're working closely with restaurants to make sure we're offering something that works really well.
Yeah, I like that. Well, the flexibility is key there. And as you know, with restaurant operators, they feel a little bit gigged when it comes to these commission scenarios. We won't talk about who that's dealing with, but we know all who it's dealing with without saying that word. But
absolutely, and again, that comes back to why we think this solution is working and is so attractive for restaurants, and why we're getting so much traction. Is I talked about adoption, I talked about operational, but also cost. I mean, today it's actually terrifying to think how much restaurants are paying in payment transaction fees, and that's something as a company that's built by restaurateurs for restaurants, we're trying to crack as well.
Let's go into just the mechanics of it from a restaurant operator's viewpoint. I've rolled this out. I put the the QR codes on all my tables. you said your adoption rates in Europe were quite high. Have you seen data here in the US yet, enough at least at critical mass, that you could give a good adoption rate on payment percentages at maybe that someone was collecting, say 50%, what kind of growth would they have seen utilizing this tool?
So, great question. Right now, all the restaurateurs that we've been talking to, and we're going live in May in the US, so we don't actually have hard data for the US.
Okay.
We're getting a lot of feedback from restaurants that adoption should be high for two reasons. One, in the US, QR code adoption is going through the roof. So a year ago, a lot of people didn't know how to use QR codes, and a lot of restaurants were saying, I definitely don't want to put one on my table. That's something that has evolved dramatically over the past 12 months. So we see that in the US, the market is ripe for QR codes. The second piece is you need the team on the ground in the restaurant, the waiters, to push the payment method to have high adoption.
Right.
And because the wait staff is finding the tool so great because it gets them to save time, what you're seeing is they're actually pushing it. And so when I talked about 80% adoption in Europe this summer, and now we're seeing 96% adoption in the UK, it's because over the past 6 months, not only have people become even more accustomed to using QR code, but restaurant staff has realized that this is an awesome tool for them. And so when you have customers asking for it and used to using it, and you have wait staff pushing it, I mean, the combination is explosive, and everyone ends up using it. So then, what you see is restaurants benefit from the fact that more people using it means faster table turn time, more opportunity to upsell, and that's when you really start having extremely positive effect for restaurants.
Yeah, the trickle-down effect is definitely there for sure, especially when you remove the whole payment transaction and just kind of that uneasiness of waiting on a bill or having to try to kind of tackle that. I have a few questions on how you deal with like split check splitting, but I want to get to one point. Europe has been a market that mobile payment has kind of grown. I would say it's faster in terms of adoption rate than the United States, primarily because of the merchants over there in Europe and their ability to bring pay at the table to the market years before we really saw it here in the United States. And only recently have we seen pay at the table kind of take hold. So my question, I guess, would be, in Europe, the adoption I could see being at 80+%. Here in the US, with pay at the table just not being as reinforced as it has been like in Europe, do you feel like you guys will have to overcome kind of that, that initial hump of consumers wanting to pay by credit card versus wanting to use the QR card? I'm kind of curious on any kind of research that you've seen in terms of the American mindset versus the Europeans.
Yes, absolutely. So we've done research on this, and when we've interviewed restaurants, what we're suspecting, given also what's happened with the pandemic in the past year, is that customers are going to jump straight from not having the pay at table option, going straight to their phone. And the truth is, people in the US have been using their phones now for 10 years to book flights, to book rental cars. I mean, it's absolutely something that's been adopted in the US, and in other industries, mobile payment is very frequent. It's just the restaurant industry, which is a little bit of an anomaly. And so because there is that user adoption already in the US and that we have a very digitally affine market, we're suspecting, and that's what we've projected in all our models, is that the US customer is going to jump straight from what there is now, which is, you're right, not very mature pay at table technologies, straight to payment on their phone. And that's obviously accelerated by the speed that comes from paying with your phone, but also the fact that people don't want to touch their credit card anymore, right? And they don't want to give it to somebody, wait for it to disappear for a few minutes. So we're actually thinking it's going to go even faster because you're going to skip that phase, which hasn't been adopted in the US yet.
Right, and I'm kind of curious when you look at that, because you're right, the adoption hasn't really taken hold, obviously, with what happened in 2020, the evolution of mobile payment and just kind of the tool sets were really kind of coming into the industry pretty heavily. With this happening, I would assume that, are you guys regulated in any way like a credit card company? Because this is going to really kind of replace all of the terminal business, the point of sale. When I say point of sale, I mean the little credit card terminals.
Yes.
That essentially would eliminate the terminal business, in many cases, the merchant programs. All of those kinds of things pretty much are gone if your success is big here in the US. What kind of regulatory issues do you feel like you could face?
So also a great question. I think one thing to think about is our ambition is to simplify the process, right? We want to be the fastest restaurant payment method in the world. And right now it's working. People can pay in less than 10 seconds. And so one of our values at Sunday is simplicity. And so how can we make sure for restaurants, it's simple on the operational side, and for customers, it's simple. And so what we've seen is that we're taking out a lot of the steps that have been fairly painful and expensive for restaurants and for end consumers. So if you think of how successful a lot of companies like PayPal and Venmo have been, they've simplified the process in other areas, and that's what we're looking at to do. So on the regulatory issue, this is very important, and that's also why short term we're working with Stripe. Because Stripe is obviously a very reliable payment partner, and they're enabling us to go faster in the market with this.
Right. Okay, so I'm not sure you answered that question. On regulatory, are you anticipating any kind of regulatory issues that would, because in essence you're kind of circumventing the merchant system. So if you're circumventing the merchant system, which people are saying, okay, I don't need a merchant account anymore, I just need a Sunday account. And I'm going to arbitrage through Sunday into Stripe, which I could get a Stripe account, sure, but that I'm also paying fees on. But I don't need my, my point of sale terminals, any of those kind of things, if I just simply require people to do mobile payment at my restaurant. Are you finding the adoption rate kind of, I guess, first question is, do you see that regulation coming at all? Or do you feel like you're secured under what you're doing with Stripe right now?
Very secured under what we're doing. So we've obviously dug into this. And the answer is there shouldn't be a reason to have particularly more stringent regulatory changes around this. We're simplifying and making the process safer. And everyone around us is paying for lots of things via their phones today. So it's not as if it's dangerous to use your phone to pay for anything today. We're just bringing the hospitality industry into the disruption, which has already been going on for 10 years. It's just that the hospitality industry hasn't been doing it. And from our DNA as restaurateurs, we said we need to disrupt this industry as well, right?
Yeah.
There hasn't been enough happening in this industry, and we want to do it now.
For sure, no doubt, no doubt. But with a restaurant, they typically have the the point of sale terminals there. They've got their merchant account. This has been the old way of dealing with it. They take the card, they go over and swipe it, which is a problem here in the United States with the amount of fraud and all those kind of things. So
absolutely.
I see all this being completely circumvented. I guess
it's
that's
time for a revolution, Paul. I mean, that's really what
it is. It's a problem for the operators. Trust me, the operators that are watching this show right now are going, hallelujah. Thank goodness there's something that could, really kind of get us out of these pain points. When you look at kind of this transition occurring, because this could happen pretty quickly if it's done right.
If we do our job well, it's going to happen really quickly.
Yeah, well, and you think about operators there, because if I'm an operator, I probably am going to have to make a decision maybe within 6 months of deploying this, of should I even keep my merchant account for someone who wants to use a hard card? Or do I, because some of these restaurant operators, if you're, especially in fine dining, you're usually, and I don't want to say this in a bad way to boomers, but sometimes you're dealing with a little bit older audience that maybe feels, they've been using credit cards, plastic for years. They just feel that comfort of, let me give you my credit card. Kind of scenario, but I feel like we could jump it here. This could really be a leap forward in terms of payment. Do you think restaurant operators will get to the point where they say, hey, we only take mobile payment?
Well, what we've seen during the pandemic is that a lot of restaurants have done that, right? Where they've said, we don't take cash anymore, right? And we only do credit card, and we only do touchless payment. And so I think the pandemic has accelerated that. And that's why, from the restaurant community and the investor community, we get the feedback that the timing is right exactly for that reason, is that if there's an argument to say you could actually do that, it's now because of what's happened in the last 12 months across the globe.
Yeah, now I would push back on cash because I mean we've seen many companies, including Sweetgreen in New York, tried to go to a cashless platform. Obviously, their legislation within New York said no, not going to happen because now you're limiting access, which is a problem in the United States.
Yes, absolutely,
especially with the fiat. Yeah, you've got to stay with cash. But I definitely see it on the side of credit card, which is eliminating the requirement. Venmo, PayPal, most of those transactions are occurring away from a point of sale terminal. You don't have a point of sale terminal, so you have to use a mobile. But if you had one there, that's kind of where I'm looking at the weight of an operator thinking through this. It'd be interesting to see how this is going to come across.
It's a great point. One of the reasons we haven't talked so much about our fundraising round, but this is Sunday has just done the biggest fundraising round in food tech for a seed round ever. So $24 million.
What was the numbers? It was 24 million.
24 million. And
as
one of the reasons we've been able to raise 24 million on this seed round.
Okay. Who came in on the seed round? I'm kind of curious.
So our lead fund is one of the strongest fintech funds based in New York, Cotu. And then what's interesting is we have a lot of restaurateurs who've invested. A lot of European restaurateurs, a lot of American restaurateurs who've said, okay, this is a fantastic solution. We want to invest in.
Yeah.
So we're
sitting on this at all?
Sorry?
Did Union Square get in this at all?
No, Union Square didn't. So we part of that investment and the fact that we're valued at $140 million, which is remarkable for a seed round company, is because people believe in the potential of exactly what you've just been saying, is to say it's time for disruption. There's a huge opportunity in the restaurant space. There's a window of opportunity thanks to COVID, which is going to let us really, go quickly. So it's an execution play. And if we can quickly get on the tables of restaurants in America, in Europe, then there's going to be a real disruption. And we're in a great position to lead that disruption.
Let's talk about some logistics first in the categories. I see this being used in casual dining, some sit-down dining applications, fine dining, obviously, great markets for you. But if you look at QSR, fast casual, especially fast casual, an exploding category continues to outperform double-digit numbers during COVID, all those kinds of things. And in most cases, because of the logistical aspect of a fast casual order process, have you guys came up with a solution for a fast casual operator that this could be implemented? Let's just use Chipotle, for instance. I'm in that queue. Now I'm at the end of I've got that terminal right there that I usually am swiping with. I pull out my credit card, doing all that kind of stuff. Is there a solution in play for Sunday to alleviate that, maybe speed up that line a little bit?
So it's a great question. Right now, we're focusing on table service.
Pay at the table,
just because that's where there's the operational efficiency. And when I talked earlier about the 15 minutes that you're gaining per table, that's huge. And so it makes it easier for us to enter the market with that. And, we still are a young company, so we need to focus. So we're starting with what we call, small and medium businesses. We have a number of enterprise accounts in table seating that are interested. But what we're getting excited about is we're getting a lot of inbound solicitation from QSR, a lot of stadiums as well, a lot of venues where they have to move people really quickly through the payment process. And that's where they're saying, okay, you don't get the 15-minute benefit of turning the table faster. But if people could pay, right there with a QR code, there would be a lot less friction. And so Chipotle is a great example, but there are a lot of quick service companies that we're starting to talk to in Europe and the US who are saying, this is a great solution for us because it'll go faster. And what I haven't mentioned at all yet is the reason customers love what we're doing is that we are POS agnostic and we're also restaurant. We're open to all restaurants. So this is a solution that really down the road starts with restaurants, but then moves into hospitality and then really becomes a payment solution for all of B2C payments. And so you can imagine Sunday being the reference solution for payments in physical retail, and restaurants get that. Most of these bigger chains realize that people don't necessarily want to download an app for every one of the restaurants they like to go.
Exactly.
App real estate space is precious. And so, yes, you want to have 1-2 apps, but you're not going to download an app for every one of the POSs that you could be working for or every one of the restaurant chains. And so Sunday's ambition is really to become that one place to go for payments in physical retail. And it makes sense to start with restaurants, but then you can imagine the whole rest of the physical retail industry working.
Yeah, I could see, my mind is just, going a million miles here. Because I see this,
I love
if you look
to see
at fast
that,
casual.
Paul. You get it.
Okay. The fast casual sector, especially if you could queue up payments in the line itself, your throughput's going to be an issue with fast casual just because of the distancing thing that's going to be around in society for some time. The other thing that comes into play here, when you look at the application use cases, just some of the logistical nightmares that dining operations face, and that is things like walk-offs. With this kind of scenario, have you seen any kind of issues where you've got skips happening because of the kind of that almost not, the bill presentation isn't occurring. There's not really that physical thing that has occurred between, other than eye contact kind of thing with your server. Have you seen any kind of issues around the skip processes being increased?
This is something we thought about, and when we tested the solution with 100,000 tables this summer in the Big Mama restaurants, there were no more fraud issues or walk-off issues than there would have been in the past.
Okay.
So the data today, and 100,000 touch points is a good data set, doesn't show that there's more walkaways. So far so good. That's obviously something we're monitoring. And that's where we have to work closely with the waiters to make sure that, when they get the notification in their POS that the table is closed, they can see if the person is paid or not, and they have to be reactive. So far, no major concern, but we're obviously watching that carefully.
What about restaurants that have, maybe their Wi-Fi is not so great, or even, cell service isn't that great in that particular restaurant, which I've been in some restaurants where it is like, you got nothing. Because you're back in these caves, it feels like, in these fine dining restaurants, and they almost kind of shut down the cell phone service. How are you guys dealing with something like that? What would apply there?
It's a great question, and our sales teams, when they start approaching restaurants, that's one of the first conversations they have.
First thing is
to
check.
Down the road, yes, you need to have Wi-Fi service or good cell service for it to work.
Yeah.
What we're working with is our tech teams to make sure that the bandwidth is as low as possible and it can it can work. But yes, if a restaurant is 10 stories down below and it doesn't have Wi-Fi, that's a challenge. Yeah. So far, that has not been a major issue because most restaurants are now starting to offer Wi-Fi or have reception just because they need it for their customers. And it's part of that digital revolution. So we're surfing the wave of the digital revolution, and we're not seeing it as a major pain point. But yes, it's definitely on our radar too. So
to use the Sunday payment process, I'm at a restaurant that has this. I scan the QR code. What's happening on my phone? Is it launching an app, or is it doing something unique and different? What am I going to see as a user?
Okay, so I encourage everyone to go check out the demo, which is on sundayapp.com, because it looks great and you'll see it exactly. But I will, of course, answer your question. What happens? It's a web app today, because to enter the market, we didn't want people to have to download an app. Nobody wants to download an app they're not familiar with. And so here the idea is you scan that QR code on your table, and it's connected to the POS, your bill shows up. And here you can split the bill. You mentioned that earlier, which is extremely important. We've seen about 40% of customers splitting the bill. You can add a tip, so great for increasing tips. And then you put in your payment method, or you use Apple Pay or Google Pay, whatever's connected on your phone. So down the road, obviously, there is a strategy to say, once you've used it 2, 3, 4, 5 times, and every one of your neighborhood restaurants has Sunday, then you may consider downloading the app. And that's when we start
Right.
getting even more traction. For market entry, it's intentionally a web app because we don't want people to have that extra hurdle. Nobody wants to sign in to a
Right.
new application they don't know yet, right?
Yeah. Well, I like use of progressive web apps. They definitely, kind of skip the issue of, that app problem. It does also lend itself to some other scenarios. When you look at loyalty, retention, et cetera, data on that consumer, other than what I'm getting through the card payment. I'm assuming the card payment data is still coming back to me as a restaurant operator. So do I have any kind of card payment data back
So actually,
from you, or is it all
all the
secured on your
KYC
side?
data, the know your customer data,
Yeah.
that Stripe has. And so
Okay.
you're not getting that card data back as a
Okay.
restaurant.
All right. Okay. So it's just the gateway. All right. So what about loyalty potentials here? Any plan for integrating a loyalty platform that would could possibly tie into this?
So you're asking the same question as our investors and the same question as restaurants we're starting to work with. So far, we start with the payment piece. Down the road, it makes sense to add ordering and, of course, loyalty. But
Yeah.
first, we're trying to focus on one of the parts of the user experience where there was the most pain and there's the most upside for operational improvements and improvement of the customer experience. And so
Okay.
that's why we're starting with payment. So you can see the
Yeah.
menu, you pay, but of course down the road we're looking into that because it could be huge.
Okay, so going down the payment route, any potential there for maybe implementing crypto at any point?
Yes, we're getting that question all the time, and it's obviously a
Okay.
direction we need to be going in.
Yeah. All right. So that's good. All right. So you've got, you've solved the payment scenario. You're getting a certain amount of transactional data. Are you guys providing any data back to the operator themselves? Maybe it's average check lift. I'm sure they're kind of figuring out some of this stuff, but obviously you're going to give them back, and they, to a certain point, would have to know what their percentage ratios are. But any kind of customer data that's coming back that would help them make better decisions as an operator, thinking, oh, I'm getting higher tips, I'm getting, these other little things, maybe it's frequency, any of those kind of things that would be coming back to them.
Yes. So when you sign up today to Sunday, there's a restaurant dashboard. And on that restaurant dashboard, you can see data on, what's happening with Sunday, and you can compare with what other data is going into your restaurant. And that's the beauty of being integrated into the POS. And so we obviously track adoption because that's how we know our solution is working well. If we see this adoption is high, but in order to know if adoption is high, you need to know what other transactions are going. The thing
how are you getting the table turn data?
So
how
the table turn right now, we've been observing it, and we just had empirical evidence.
Through research.
Just because we were running it in 75,000 tables, and then 100,000, we were tracking it to build the business case. One thing you mentioned about data, which most restaurants are really interested in, is if you step back, the restaurant industry is one of the last industries where restaurateurs know about their customers, right? They don't know if you return to that restaurant every Saturday or if you've been there once a year for the past 5 years. And so our vision at Sunday is to say, once we really become that go-to payment method, we're going to be able to share information on the industry on what people are doing. And so you can imagine Paul, you walk into a restaurant and that restaurant already knows that you like a glass of red wine on Friday nights with your dinner. And they know you never take dessert. So there's no point in trying to, push you a dessert. And they know you like your cappuccino with almond milk. And, that's the type of data that becomes extremely valuable. And once we get critical mass, that's the type of data we will have and we'll be able to, share with our restaurants. And that's when the vision becomes huge. So I talked about becoming that B2C payment app and think about the beauty of the data you can start having about, how customers act. And that's what gets everyone so excited about the potential of Sunday.
Well, yeah, I think you're definitely going down the right line of some kind of data back to the operator that can kind of help them make some decisions and really understanding how an app like this would work. The payment component, I think, is a no-brainer for operators to really kind of look at. If you can see the adoption rate really start to grow here in the US, definitely, which I think it will. I think now people have just kind of got to that level. Do you see any challenges with the boomer or the older audience kind of having any issues with adopting in, or have you done any research on that particular demographic, especially here in the US where it's rather large?
Great question. In all the data we collected over the past months in the Big Mama restaurants, we saw that it across the board people are using it. So what happened during pandemic is actually the boomer generation was even more careful and even more keen to use technology, which avoided contact.
Interesting. Okay.
And we all saw it, right? Just because of the nature of the pandemic. And so what we've seen is that there's been more adoption with boomers than you would have expected, just because they were particularly sensitive to making sure they used, digital technology. And this goes across the board, be it, with Instacart or, with online groceries. Or boomers have been one of the fastest groups to adopt technology because of the nature of the pandemic. And so that's benefiting us, obviously.
Yeah. Bluetooth low energy beacons were out in force, pre-pandemic, kind of looking at, traffic patterns, a certain amount of loyalty, density scenarios like that. I could see this potentially being a solution where maybe a BLE, type scenario could somehow interface with your platform, especially through, these meta tags that can essentially kind of ride on top of these phones and then drop into a device or an app like what you guys, when I say app, meaning your progressive web app. Any potential for the future of using beacons to kind of help identify consumers more?
So we've talked about it. We're not there yet, but hopefully I'll be able to come back on your show and tell you what we're doing in that area. But right now we're not there yet. I think the potential is huge.
Yeah. Well, beacons definitely, and it's kind of an interesting technology that started, it was up and moving fairly well, and then it kind of went to sleep, I felt like, for the industry. A lot of that was COVID, and we've seen complete shifts towards what kind of tech we're seeing in the industry for sure.
A lot of people said the same thing about QR codes, right? Is why didn't QR codes really take off? And that's exactly what we've seen happen with the pandemic, is now QR codes are everywhere. And, everyone knows how to use them. I mentioned it earlier. And so adoption is here. And so we're expecting that to happen. And, QR codes are just an entry point into our larger vision of becoming that B2C payment solution. Sure. And you can imagine new technologies making that even easier and seamless. You walk in and you don't even need to scan the QR code, but if you have the app on your phone, it pops up, it says, "Hi, Paul, welcome," and then when your check is ready, can you confirm if you want to pay $85, and then you just say yes, and it's perfectly seamless.
Just to be clear before we kind of wrap up here, when you guys say you're integrated into all the point of sales, essentially you're on the payment side of things. So you're not having to go out and develop API relationships with Squirrel and PAR and Positech and all these different companies, are you? Or is it you're?
No, it's exactly what we're doing. So right now we're building relationships with most of the POSs. And yes, the market is very fragmented in Europe and the US. But a lot of the POSs out there want to have a progressive pay-at-table solution and are eager to work with us. And because we're coming with a lot of funding, a lot of energy, operators' knowledge, we're seeing that we're actually getting a lot of traction. And so what we've seen is for the ones that didn't necessarily have us on the radar, when restaurants started going to the POSs and saying, "Hey, I want to work with Sunday," that had them raise eyebrows and say, "You know what? This is adding something to my app market, and it's adding a feature that I didn't have, and it's making restaurants think it's attractive to work with me. So why don't we go ahead?" And that's been surprisingly positive reception from the POS industry.
Yeah, well, I think you're right. The point of sale companies, they've seen kind of the writing on the wall. There was a little bit of a slow adoption into moving to next generation point of sale. Now I think we're seeing more and more of those just because of the success of companies like Square and Revo and you name them. Not to mention many of them who work with us on our shows here. But definitely I see the fact that these companies they do see the writing on the wall. It's going in this direction. It's just a matter of time. Well, very cool. When is the official launch date? When will restaurants be able to have Sunday on Monday?
Sunday on Monday in May. So that's coming up. We have a couple more weeks. As I mentioned, we are live now in Spain and the UK. And we should be live in a couple weeks in the US. Our sales teams are already hitting the ground running. And so, please go visit our website, sundayapp.com.
Cool.
You can sign up there and you'll get a call from our sales team.
Very cool. Christine, it's been great having you on. We'll definitely keep a very close watch on you as we start to see payment technologies explode across the United States. So good luck out there.
Well, it was a pleasure meeting you, and I hope to have lots of your watchers sign up.
There you go. All you guys listening
Have
in.
a great day.
Thank you. Thank you, Christine.
Bye-bye.
All right, so you guys are listening in. Maybe you're over on the podcast. Make sure and give us a rating. Also, subscribe to the show over there. You can listen in while you're driving or doing whatever, if you're probably not commuting much these days. But also, if you're catching us over on YouTube, make sure and like the video, also subscribe, and hit the bell. That's going to give you notifications of more content like this coming out to you. And of course, it's the best way for you to get all the updated content right here from Foodable Network and also the Paul Barron Network on YouTube if you're watching over there. Lastly, if you want to reach out to us for a show idea, you can send it to producer@revernetworks.com. That's REVER networks.com. Or hit me up on Twitter @Paul Barron. We'll catch you next time right here on The Barron Report.